Okay, we're on page Kuf Yud Gimel, letter Hey. Mimer Bey is the second mimer, second essay in Kedusha. Kuf Yud Gimel Hey. So in letter Daled, the Rebbe explained the importance of building the yeshivos, the importance of recognizing the kedusha of the Jewish neshama, and through that's the most effective shmira, most important guarding against the Yetzer, and specifically in this area, whereas the Rebbe described it, you don't want to sell the kedusha of the yid for a pot of beans. So when you're speaking about a lowly taiva, that's a strong taiva, the most effective shmira is a person knows what he has. And therefore, you know to guard it, you know to value it, because you've come to recognize its chashivas, importance. So here you have this beautiful yachas, this relationship with Hashem. How could you ruin that? How could you detract from it? By giving into taiva. Letter Hey is different. Letter Hey is when the person is in the throes of battle. So there's a different theme to today's piece. In the battle against a person's Yetzer, a person must clutch on to Mida Keneged Mida, meeting the Yetzer measure for measure. Imhu mishtamish bekochos tiviim, ala adam gam kein lishtamish bekochosav ativim kedei lilcham negdo. If the Yetzer is using natural means in order to wage a war against the person, then the person has to counter the Yetzer with the natural means. For example, like the Yetzer creates all sorts of images, false imagery or messages that come to us. That, if you have this, then you'll have happiness. Or if you're given to this taiva, then you'll have satisfaction. So that's using some sort of power of pitui, of persuasion. They call it today marketing. So that means the person has to counter that Yetzer by being able to persuade himself to Kedusha. Or by being able to build, an image of the lure of being drawn to Kedusha. Or marketing in a holy sense toward the kedusha. So you have to meet the Yetzer. If the Yetzer gets into a person's thoughts and begins to persuade the person that this is really okay and this is a correct thing, then a person has to use chachma, his ideas, his wisdom against the Yetzer, and be mizbonein, has to think as well.
I would say when. Not if.
When?
For most people, right?
When it occurs.
Yeah.
Ach, be'eshem mishtamish neged ha'adam bekochos al tiviyim. But when the Yetzer begins to utilize forces that are not natural, ukulashon chazal pachaz ala yitzri ubikesh letordeini min ha'olam. Chazal uses this expression in regard to a Nazir. Chazal tell a story about Shimon HaTzadik. Was a Kohen. He was Mishiarei Knesset Gadola, of the last sages of the Anshe Knesset Gadola, and it was a Kohen Gadol. He's the Kohen Gadol that went to meet Alexander the Great when he came to the land of Israel, and since the Jewish people had earlier sided with Persia, and they were an enemy against Alexander having beat Persia, and enemies of the Jews in Ner Yisrael tried to use that opportunity to persuade Alexander to destroy, conquer the Jewish community. So Shimon HaTzadik was the Kohen Gadol who went out in all the clothing of the Kohen Gadol to try and persuade Alexander otherwise. So it says that he never ate of a carbon of a nazir. And the nazir brings a carbon at the end of his nazirus, except for one time. And the circumstance was what the Gemara speaks about, what the Rebbe is referencing, that Shimon HaTzadik once encountered a very beautiful, handsome nazir, and who looked very disheveled and did not take care of his appearance, and his hair had grown. And he said to him, "My son, why did you do this?" So he said, "Pachaz ala yitzri." I was working for my father, and I saw my image in the water, and I realized how beautiful I was, what a catch I was, and I felt my yetzer pachaz alai just completely begin to overtake me. Pechiza is like an impetuous feeling, like you want to do something right away without thought. Ubikesh letardeini min olam, and it sought to completely take me away from the world. So that's describing a type of yetzer that's either it's unnatural or it's natural, but it's very powerful. And this is not the time for the person to be able to think about the kedusha of the neshama, right? Yeah. Or to sort of counter it with different sort of chachma. That's not going to work. Az tzarach latzeis b'mulchemes charma b'kolchos ha'al tivim shabadam. Then it's time for a person to go out on an all-out war, a war of destruction, using unnatural means within the person. Ukaoso nazar shabam and adar, and so that story of the nazar that came from the south, sha'amad v'nishbal Yisrael. He was a very special servant of God. First, in that he recognized he was in a battle. And that's an important point, because sometimes a person, they're overcome by the Yetzer, but to have the recognition that you're in a Milchama means that you have a very strong cognizance of the Yetzer, and you see him as sort of a force that's really in contention with you continuously. So, as opposed to, I'm just, I have a taiva and I want to fulfill it. So that's the first point. You see that he was a special person because he recognized that he was in a battle. But then he did something more extraordinary. Sha'amad v'nishba liyitzro. He stood up and he swore to his yetzer. And he said, Ha'avoda sha'agachelcha l'shamayim. I swear that I'm going to cut you off, and cut my hair off for the sake of Shamayim. So he made a shvuah, and as using Hashem's name, he made a shvuah. And his shvuah was directly speaking to the Yetzer, that I will cut off this beauty for Hashem's sake. So the Rebbe cites other examples from the Medrash where we see tzaddikim did this. Kamosh matzinu etzel Boaz, she'amar chai Hashem shichvi ad haboker. So you recall the story of Rus, when Naomi told Rus to get Boaz's attention, that she should go down to the granary where he was working the field and threshing the wheat and processing it, and he'll be sleeping there, and you are to go down there and with all your full beauty and uncover his legs. Let's take the blanket off his legs. So when she came there, so she obviously startled Boaz. So the pasuk says, Chai Hashem, says, by the life of God, Shichvi ad haboker, stay here until morning. Amru Chazal say, Shenishbal Yisrael, he was taking a shvuah to his Yetzer. Chai Hashem, when a person says by the life of God, I think Rashi and Mefarshim explain that just as Hashem has true existence, so a person takes a shvuah by clutching on to something that's true. So also this will be. So he was swearing that, I swear that I will not touch you. And he was making a shvuah to his Yetzer. Because in other words, he felt his Yetzer overwhelming him. And so he took a shvuas Hashem against his Yetzer that he would not touch her.
So is the Yetzer for each person within themselves, Rabbi? So different for every person? That's another temptation or force within every male or female? And if
Yeah.
you know, it's within what? It's part of our being, our soul, what is it? It's just a massive temptation. You can't trick it. We just have to defend it and have the tools, like you said.
It's part of the makeup of every person. Have the person having like the Esser Spheros, the 10 Spheros of Kedusha, 10 basic powers. There's also 10 powers on the other side. That's the counter koach, the counter power of that thing. And every person is different, though. In other words, the makeup,
Right.
individual is different.
The question is in it, with everything that was, is, and will be, was already created by Hashem. Is that something that Hashem built into us? It's not just something that came from human beings existing, and just like the difference of good and not good, the choices we make, is that part of the free will?
It's a good question. I mean, it's much more broad to deal with. Yes, it was, but man brought that much closer to him.
Okay.
And
I see that.
in our own lives, we can bring it closer or further.
Right.
And then, of course, the temptation is raised. The closer it is, there's a proximity. Proximity meaning, what we allow sort of to enter into our atmosphere.
I know.
So once it's in the atmosphere, it's in your atmosphere, it's closer to having greater power.
Thank you.
Also, an extraordinary story with Palti ben Laish. The story is that Shaul had promised his daughter to the person that would kill Goliath, and it was rightfully belonged to David. But somehow David didn't end up marrying her right away, and Shaul married her off to a person named Palti ben Laish. Now Palti ben Laish was aware that she was already halachically betrothed to David, and therefore not permissible to him. So Chazal say that he took a sword and he plunged it into the bed in between him and her, and he said, "The one that crosses over the sword will get the sword." He was talking to himself. There's another part to the Chazal. It's very interesting that Chazal say the third person that did it was Avram Avinu. Where was this? Where did Avram make a shua to Hashem?
As far as after the binding, what are we talking about, or this type of a situation?
This type of situation.
I didn't know.
After Avram Avinu killed the 5 kings in battle, and the king of Sodom came out to greet him. So he wanted to give Avram all the wealth, all the bounty, that's the plunder that really Avram returned through defeating all these kings. So Avram Avinu told him, "No, you keep the wealth. I just want what's coming to the people that battled with me, what they're deserving of." That's what the Torah says. But the pasuk says, "Harimosi yadi al Hashem." I raise my hand to Hashem. Im ekach misroch, atzroch anal. If I will take anything. So Chazal say, "Harimosi Hashem." I raise my hand to Hashem as a shua, as a swear. And today, people raise their hand to swear.
Yeah.
That's the origin of it. I raise my hand to Hashem means Avram Avinu felt actually an inkling to take the money. He felt the yetzer that he should take the money. It's coming to me, whatever the cheshbon is. He made a shvua against that yetzer. I will not touch anything of that money. So, in these situations, if people use the shvua, swear, using Hashem's name to battle off the Yetzer. Now, this is sort of something a person would naturally not do, not take a shvuah using Hashem's name, but in a circumstance like this, people did it. B'matzav kazet tzarach ladas ulahakir nechona es erech hanusayon sherotzim l'nasosim nashamayim. In a situation like that, a person must recognize and value the test that Shamayim is testing him with. And if he stands up to the test, how he will elevate himself, and the opposite if he doesn't stand up. And he must value properly the critical moments that to distinguish whether he will ascend to the heights or descend to the depths. So this is really Shemayim. We have to see this. This is a test. This is an assignment. And a person has to have the awareness of the test that's coming from Shemayim and the importance of passing the test. Ukamo b'nisayon shel Yosef, ma haya ola b'sofo, im chas v'shalom ha'inech b'avera, like Yosef's test. What would have come out in the end if, God forbid, he was stumbled in the avera? She'ya'avod mi beis olamos v'nishar eved mitzri l'olam. He would have been lost from both worlds. It was olam hazeh and olam haba. He wouldn't have an olam hazeh, and would have remained a servant, a slave in Egypt forever. And what he actually attained when he overcame the Yetzer in that moment, he went out of jail and went on to become a king, and eventually became the Merkava. In other words, he became the conduit to bring forth Hashem's midah of Yesod. Each tzaddik is the Merkava. They're the chariot. In other words, Hashem, in a sense, rides upon them. They bring forth, they express. Hashem's midah, Yesod, came out through Yosef. So look at a critical moment, in a moment, of the test, and the outcome, if a person is successful or not. Al derech zayesh b'adam gam kein regain nisayon hamachriin neschai v'agashmiyim v'ruchanim. Along these lines, each person has moments of test that will distinguish his life in regard to the material and the spiritual. So we don't, it's not necessarily written up in the Torah, but we have these tests. Like Chazal say, had Aaron known what the Torah would have written about him, that he went out to greet Moshe after Moshe was selected as the Navi, and it says, V'ra'acha v'samach b'libo, he was happy in his heart, that Aaron had no jealousy for Moshe Rabbeinu, even though his younger brother now was selected to be the messenger of Hashem, take out Bnei Yisrael. But Aaron didn't have any of these feelings, but just the opposite. He was happy. If Aaron would have known what the Torah would have written, he would have gone out like dancing, like with incredible joy. So when there's a write-up about you, so then if there's a write-up about you, and it'll be the headline, so then that will impact the person in the moment. Everyone knows what's going to be with me if I pass this test. The fanfare it's going to be will encourage the person to pass it. But we don't have that. I'm saying the Torah is not writing up about us. We have no write-ups, right? But we have the same tests. And these tests define, in those critical moments, important outcomes for the person.
The camera's always rolling, though.
Camera's always rolling.
Right up about us.
That's right.
We always need to be on.
The Baba Rebbe used to say this when saying over the story. I think it was of the Nachum of Chernobyl. I think it was the story that he was terribly impoverished and had mamish nothing, and his family was, terribly hungry. Very great degrees of poverty. And the only thing he had of value was this special pair of tefillin that was written by the Sofer of the Baal Shem Tov. And that he would not give up anything for. One year, there was a terrible shortage of esrogim in the city, and no one was able to get any esrogim. And he was chalashing, like terribly desperate to get an esrog. So somehow he found out in the city nearby about a wealthy man that had an esrog. And he decided that the time had come for him to part with his tefillin. So he sold his heilige tefillin that was so precious to him for the esrog. And he comes home and he's mamish full of great simcha that he has an esrog for Syracuse. And his wife sees him, simcha, right? And she says, "Why are you so happy?" He says, "I have an esrog." She says, "You have an esrog? How did you get an esrog?" How do you get an esrog? He said, the tefillin that I have from the sofa, the Baal Shem Tov, I sold them for the esrog. Yeah. So, Shemamish, in a great act of incredible fury, she takes the esrog and she just crashed it to the ground, like splinters into like 100 pieces. And Nachum stands there and he's just like not saying anything, and he looks up to Shemai and he says, Rebbetzin Shalom, I had my tefillin and now I don't have my tefillin. And I had my esrog and now I don't have an esrog. But I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to give up my closeness to you. So the Baba Rebbe said that's such to be able to stand up to an assignment like that could only be of a person is always in Deveikus to Hashem. Because the camera's always rolling.
Right.
You can't script like the moment, how to act. You have to be acting or being real all the time in order to act in such a moment. So the Nisayon, in a sense, in one degree, is the outcome of the constant spiritual life of the person. And this Chazal say in the Medrash, Al Pasuk Elokim Nisas Avraham and God tested Avraham. Hahu Dichsiv. This is what the pasuk means. Nasata l'ri'acha nes l'isnoses. Pasuk in Tehillim says, "You've given to you those who fear you a nes, a banner to raise, to wave." So the word nes means a banner, and the Medrash Chazal are connecting that to a test, to the word nisa, test. So what's the kasha? What's the connection? It says the Rebbe b'shvil nasosan ulegadlam ba'olam. The Medrash says, in order to raise them, to make them great in the world. Kanes hazeh shel asfina, just like the ship has a banner on top. In other words, Elokim Nisa, Hashem tested Avraham. The purpose of the test is the nes, is a banner. That through the Nisayon, the test, the person is really raised. It's only through the test and the person is really pushed to the limit, and they're able to come through. That they're raised up, right? Like it says at the end of the Akedah, the Malach told Hashem, "Don't touch him," because Hashem wants to know that you feared him. And it says, "Ata yadati." Now we know, Ki yireh l'kimata, you fear Hashem. You were pushed to see if you have yiras Hashem, and he came forth that he has this midah of yiras Hashem to this degree. So the tachlis, the purpose of the nisayon, the nisayon is kanes, like a flag, a banner. The Nisayon is really a gift from heaven. They're giving the person his damnus lis alos lis romim, the opportunity to raise himself up, to elevate himself. Through overcoming a difficult test. It's like Chazal say, Asara nisyonos nesnasa Avram Avinu v'amad b'kulam. Avram Avinu was tested 10 times, and he stood up to all of them. This tells you how beloved Avram Avinu was. So it's not by chance that he was tested 10 times, but that, in other words, in the making of Avram Avinu, Hashem designed 10 tests to work Avram Avinu out and to bring Avram Avinu to Avram Avinu. And that shows you, that's why there's a special chiba, a special love for Avram Avinu. Or why, it says, you Hashem, you're the one that chose Avram, right? Hashem chose Avram because Avram, wanted to be chosen, chose to be chosen. So the Ramban writes an incredible thing. The Yisa b'Sefer Emunah B'Tachon Michas LaRamban Zal. There's a sefer called Emunah B'Tachon. It's attributed. Its authorship is attributed to the Ramban. He writes the following thing: Al Tachshov Shemalasa Shel Avram Avinu Haya Kol Kach Gedol Mitzad Shekim Kol Torah. Don't think that the great stature of Avram Avinu came about because he fulfilled the Torah, and fulfilled the Torah in a very high madrega. Not just kept the Torah, but kept the Torah in such a way. You had other people among the Jewish people that kept the Torah like Avram. The Gemara already tells us about 4 people that were without Avera, and they died only because death was decreed upon man from Adam Arishon. Avram's chiba, his belovedness to Hashem, was because he stood up to tests. And through that, you can understand how beloved he was. And that is the main greatness and the beauty of the extraordinary belovedness that Avram Avinu attained before Hashem. Tests. As Avram Avinu was pushed greatly, and he stood up to each test. Chazal say that when Avram Avinu was thrown into the kifshan ha'ish, thrown into the fiery furnace, so Chazal say that before it happened, if he was ready to be Moser Nefesh, like a debate that occurred between the Malachim. So they said, let's see, what he is, what he's made of. Because the difference between Avram and Noach, whether Avram Avinu would have continuity in the sense of his children becoming the Am Hashem, would be if he's ready to be Moser Nefesh, to give himself up. So if he's able to be Moser Nefesh, to give himself, to stretch himself, then that's a sign, that's a siman that he's going to have continuity. He's more than just a servant of Hashem individually, but he has hemsheichios, he has continuity. So it's the Mesiras Nefesh, or the being able to stand up to a test and to push yourself to that limit, beyond the limit, that really distinguishes the person. Maus hanasayon mashmuso hu al pi diisa b'sefer teshuaschein. the nature of a test and its implication is an idea based on the Sefer Deshuas Chein, Parshas Vayechi b'Shem HaBesht Ziyah, from the Baal Shem Tov. Shebe'ez nesayon la'adam hu bevechinas estalkos hadas. When a person is given a test, it's like all his das is removed. Right? And the das means the knowledge, and the knowledge on the level of a kesher, like a bind that the person has with Hashem. That's the level of das. When a person is given a test, the best taught, there's histalkos hadas. All the das, in other words, all of the type of wisdom that gives you connection. Not brains in your head and ideas in your head, right? It's the types of wisdom that become you and bind you to Hashem. That's all taken away at the moment of a test. It's not there. It's absent from the person. So all you have is like this overwhelming test, and you don't have to be able to counter it with the built-up das. That's the person. Ubir Bazeh and the Teshuos Chein explained Mash Kasav Elokim Nisas Avram. Why does the Torah use the word Elokim? The name of Hashem Elokim in the test of Avram. Shem Elokim Moral Midas Hadin Vat Simsum Shem Mochen Dekatnus. The name of Hashem is Elokim, describes Hashem acting with a Midas Hadin, which means constriction. Constricted way. That is the Mochen Dekatnus, the small-mindedness. Constricted. Not expansiveness. Not the heightened awareness and the kesher with Hashem that person has. At the time of a test, it's Mochen Dekatnus. It's not, you have nothing. Well, there's a story with the Baal Shem Tov. He was captured by pirates, and they were going to kill him. And he was with his servant. Some say it was with his daughter. And the servant says, "No, do a mofes, do a miracle." You know, it's all these stories about the Baal Shem Tov, and he saw them. Where's the miracles? Baal Shem Tov says, "I don't have anything. I have nothing." So like, Rebbe, something. Yeah, he's something. So he keeps on pushing him. He's like, "You remember things? The only thing I know is the Aleph base. It's the only thing I have left with nothing. Good, say the Aleph base." So through his uttering of the Aleph base, he was able to bring about a nes. He was able to ma'orer, the Rachamim from Shemayim through the, enunciating the Osios. So the point is that in a test, you have nothing. Mm-hmm. As great as you are, and as much as you've become, and the das you have, doesn't mean anything in the time of a test. V'oz beis heyoso bekatnus v'stalkus hamochin nisas Avram. When did Hashem test Avram? When he was in the small-mindedness. He was missing all of his awareness and his heightened connection to Hashem. Then Hashem tested him. She'enu margish bezman zeh ha'aras hadas v'rikshav. He doesn't feel the illumination of that connection and the feelings of love. Avram Avinu constantly was. He didn't have that. So only that which he would attain through working. That's the saying, working, trying to battle yourself through a Nesayim. The Torah is teaching you. A person cannot reach his purpose in this world except through difficult tests. That's what the Torah is teaching. The Rebbe says, Avram Avinu became Avram through the 10 tests. The same thing with every person. It comes through difficult tests. The tests could be momentary, they could be elongated. Mm-hmm. They're not just momentary. They could be tekufos, an era of where a person is being tested. Avram Avinu reached his level through these 10 tests. Yosef attained his level through the test. The tests are banners to wave. That's the purpose of the test. And we can connect it to the word nes also. As the person has to act in a miraculous sort of way. You have to act in a way that's not natural. And as the Rebbe said before, you have to reach for things that are not naturally part of the person, but they are shaykh, the person is capable of having at the time of a test. It's within the arsenal of a person, but not normally accessed. So a person has to act in a nes, in a miraculous way. When the Yetzer overcomes the person and is seeking to remove him from the world, a person must know his mission in that moment. How do you stand up and save your life? To take a shvur, to swear against the Yetzer. And through that, a person will see his great belovedness to Hashem when each of us stand up to Nisayon. So it's not only about, as in letter Daled, the person Shemira, protection, comes about through having a recognition and a value of the Kedusha, but often a person's in a place of Melchama, in a place of a test. And the test doesn't say test, testing. It doesn't have that. It's just happening.
Morning.
This is happening. The person has to be aware that this is a test, and Hashem is working him out, and he has to utilize the different approaches how to overcome a test, and that's what the critical moments of life are built on, or the times of life are built on these difficult tests, which can come in the form of difficult people, difficult circumstances in life, regarding money, regarding children, regarding taiva, desire, or HaMiddos. But these are all different nisyonos. And like the Ramban says, the chiba, the belovedness of the person, comes forth when they stand up to Nisayon.
But since we're not able to use our das at those times, then what do we use? We just have emunah.
You have yigia, you have effort. You can have emunah. Exactly, you have emunah. A person can clutch onto his emunah that he has. Maybe he can't feel right now that kasher, that connection to Hashem, but he knows he has it, and he knows the outcome, what's going to happen if he gives in.
I know one thing is that in Nachman says that nature has a set path, and he said, but tefillah, prayer, is above nature, and he said also that tefillah is bechinat nes, the aspect of a miracle. So when a person is connected to prayer, that person can in fact go above nature. So that natural test that you have coming against you, it's through the tefillah that a person can rise above it. He said because to have a nes, a person has to believe that there's a mechadesh, that there's an originator, that Hashem can change something at any single moment. So even if you don't have all of your das isn't with you at that time, if you are connecting yourself to the tefillah, then a person can come out of that. And also, I remember Rabbi Gorgi was telling me that when it says that Hashem doesn't give a person a test that he can't handle, the word there is it brings out somehow that the test is also connected to nes, that meaning that it takes a miracle even that test that Hashem gave you that you couldn't handle, but you still need a miracle. I mean, he gave you the test that you can handle, but you still need a miracle to get out of it. And really, the only way to connect to that miracle is through that tefillah. Pulling yourself out of it.
Tefillah, bechinat nes, bechinat emunah.
Right. No, bechinat.
This is all.
Right.
All of it.
Sure.
You have to stay in the fields.
Ay